Welcome to the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I am your host, Ian Kelly. We're here in the entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. And it is a great Friday night to talk about the sports world. And while here in Las Vegas, Nevada, you have the Vegas Golden Knights taking on their activities right now. You had at the racetrack at Las Vegas Motor Speedway a very interesting battle at the NASCAR Truck Series competition. The NFL world has a lot to talk about. Right now in the NFL world, there is the combine taking place in Indianapolis. They've had the 40-yard dash time very recently. You're seeing the quarterback drills, all these great activities that are taking place in the NFL scouting combine. So while the rookies are doing what they are doing right now and they're trying to get prepared to getting drafted, making their stock go up, making their stock go down, there's one aspect of the NFL that we're going to focus on tonight's show here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. That aspect is the quarterback carousel of the 2021 NFL offseason. More importantly, the 9 teams that are going to be taking place and are going to be associated with that carousel of quarterbacks in this upcoming offseason. Understand that there is 9, and I'll say it once again, 9 NFL teams that are going to be in the sweepstakes. They are going to be in need of a new quarterback in 2022. And we're going to be talking about today those 9 teams. And more importantly, we're going to be discussing not only who the quarterbacks could be that are going to go there, but we're also going to be discussing how their 2021 counterpart did and what their 2022 version needs to do to be better. So if we're going to do this right, if we're going to talk about a quarterback carousel, then we got to start with a team that desperately needs a quarterback. We need to start with a team that has a former number 1 overall pick as their starting quarterback today. We need to discuss an organization that traded their franchise cornerstone, their face of the franchise, to the out west, and got back a quarterback who had a awful, abysmal year and absolutely crapped the bed when it mattered the most. So, the person that I'm talking about and the team that we're going to be talking about is we're going to have to take a little trip. We're going to have to travel, get on our Boeing, and get on a flight down to the Motor City. All right, we're going to leave Harry Reid International Airport, Las Vegas International Airport, and we're going to get on our Boeing, and we're going to fly all the way down to Detroit. We're going to go down to Motor City, and we're going to talk about the Detroit Lions. There's a reason why the Detroit Lions organization is drafting second in this upcoming draft. There is a reason why the Detroit Lions organization needs a quarterback. Because if you examine and if you actually look at what Jared Goff did last year, if you see the statistics of what Jared Goff produced, or more I say, not produced, with the Detroit Lions last year, it was absolutely abysmal to what he did in the pocket with the Detroit Lions. His stats was this. He had only 3,245 yards for a starting quarterback in 2021. That is among the worst. He only had 19 touchdowns. Keep in mind that this is a NFL where the average is 32. He had 8 interceptions, which is actually a little above the league average. Now, understand that Jared Goff also last year had a win-loss record. I want everyone, especially people in the back, to hear this. Jared Goff last year with the Detroit Lions went 3-10-1 as their starting quarterback. So now you might be asking your host, Ian Rickelli, here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, what do the Detroit Lions have to examine from what Jared Goff did last year to what their quarterback needs to do this year? And I will give you that answer by saying there's two different things that they need to do. There is two different aspects of Jared Goff's game that he did not do well at, that their quarterback of the future has to do correctly. Now, the first one that Jared Goff struggled with last year, something that he really had a hard time with, and that was his touchdown to interception ratio. Understand that when it comes to a guy like Jared Goff, a guy who, once again, in Los Angeles, had a touchdown to interception ratio of 5.9, his interception to touchdown ratio went down to 3.8. Understanding that dropping from that number goes insane in terms of analytics and in terms of data when it comes to the NFL. Understand that having a 3.8 touchdown to interception ratio means that for almost every 4 touchdowns he did, he had 1 interception. Keep in mind that there's quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers, there's quarterbacks like Drew Brees, there were quarterbacks like Peyton Manning that their touchdown to interception ratio was a heck of a lot higher. In fact, there were some quarterbacks who their touchdown to interception ratio is around 8, because for every touchdown they give, for let's just say 8 touchdowns, they would have 1 interception. That's what an elite quarterback does in the NFL. So for Jared Goff to have pretty much a 4-to-1 ratio in 2021 is alarming as a starting quarterback. So that's the first thing the Detroit Lions need to do for the quarterback position. The new quarterback, if it's for the draft, if it's from the offseason, if it's a trade, regardless of how they do it, the Detroit Lions are going to need to bring in a quarterback who has a higher touchdown to interception ratio than what Jared Goff did last year. And then the second thing that he did not do correctly that the new quarterback needs to take care of is the first down passing throughout the season. Understand that Jared Goff had a low 162 first downs in the 2021 NFL season. Now, for some of you, you might look at that and go, oh, 162, that's it. Well, understand how these are measured. Understand how first downs are ranked as a quarterback in the NFL. Understand that first downs allows your team to progress down the field. The more first downs you accumulate, that means the more opportunities you have to score. The more first downs that you pick up means more opportunities for your team to win games. Now, in 2021, I'm actually going to tell you where Jared Goff was in first down completions, and it really established my point on how bad he was at getting first downs in Detroit. Out of all the quarterbacks in the NFL who started majority of the season, he was third to last in that category. Understand that outside of Teddy Bridgewater, Jalen Hurts, and Baker Mayfield, there is really no other quarterback who was a permanent full-time starter who started at least 14 or more games that had a worse first down completion than Jared Goff. Understand that Jared Goff was ranked 20th out of the 24 quarterbacks when it came to first downs in 2021. So, if you are the Detroit Lions, you need to get yourself a quarterback in 2022 who can complete more first downs. And you need to get a quarterback who is going to be better at putting the ball down the field. So who could that be? You know, as we're talking about the Detroit Lions here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. If Jared Goff is the quarterback of the past, if they move on from Jared Goff, well, then where do they go? Who is the quarterback that the Detroit Lions organization needs to piggyback on for the future? Well, it seems very obvious because it is very obvious, but there's really only one answer here. There is only one quarterback in the 2022 NFL draft that is good enough, has experience, and is a quarterback who can get the job done in Detroit. There is a quarterback who is only good enough to be a second overall pick, and that quarterback is Malik Willis out of Liberty University. Not only has his draft combine numbers increased his draft stock, not only is the fact that Detroit Lions are curious about getting a quarterback, which only boosts up his draft stock even more, but when it comes to Malik Willis is a guy who can do it all. Yes, he has mobility, but more importantly, he's got a good arm. Malik Willis is also a person that has leadership qualities already in college. He is someone who took a Liberty University and almost made them an undefeated team in college football. Understand, this is a Malik Willis that had an opportunity to have them be in the top 25 in college football. So Malik Willis did a lot and accomplished a lot in Liberty University in college football. He has the leadership quality and he has the attributes to be in the NFL. So what I'm going to say here is for the first team that we're going to be talking about in the quarterback carousel, the Detroit Lions are going to build from the draft, and they are going to select Malik Willis with the second overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft, and they are going to replace Jared Goff with Malik Willis. Because understand that Jared Goff is not the long-term solution. Jared Goff is not the main guy in Detroit. He is not the main attraction in the Motor City. Malik Willis would be that guy. So we were talking about the Detroit Lions and their path on and their journey in the quarterback carousel of the 2021-2022 NFL offseason. But we still have some more teams to discuss. In fact, the team that we actually really need to focus on is we're going to stay in the NFC North, and we are actually going to travel down to Minnesota. All right, we're going to get on our Boeing, we're going to get on our private jet, and we are going to travel from Detroit, and we're going to go to Minneapolis. All right, we're going to go from the Motor City to the Twin Cities, okay? That's what we're going to be doing here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. So the Minnesota Vikings have a very tough decision on their hands when it comes to Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has been their starting quarterback for the last 4 seasons. Kirk Cousins has been, let's put it what it is, an above average quarterback in the NFL. Kirk Cousins has been solid, but he hasn't been great. As a matter of fact, his numbers from the 2021 NFL season goes as followed. Kirk Cousins, he went 8-8. He had 33 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions, a touchdown to interception ratio of 6, which is actually quite solid in the NFL. Had a completion percentage over 66%, 4,221 passing yards, and was a Pro Bowl selection in Las Vegas. So when you read all those stats, it immediately screams out to you, man, what an amazing quarterback. I mean, Kirk Cousins went to the Pro Bowl, over 4,200 yards, 66% completion percentage, and had a 33-7 touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, this guy's incredible. So why are you talking about the Minnesota Vikings and their quarterback carousel in 2022? Well, the reason why I'm mentioning the Minnesota Vikings is because Kirk Cousins is projected to make $45 million this offseason. Kirk Cousins is projected to make one of the top 5 paid quarterbacks in the NFL this offseason. Now, I want you to answer me this question. For all the people who are watching around the world, would you pay top 5 money to a quarterback who is listed, when it comes to completion percentage, 7th in the NFL, a guy who was 9th in passing yards, 9th in touchdowns, and surprisingly was, once again, when it comes to all active quarterbacks in the NFL, he had only 7 interceptions, which put him, surprisingly, at 27th on that list. So, when it comes to Kirk Cousins, is he worth top 5 money? Is Kirk Cousins worth $45 million a year to the Minnesota Vikings? Is a guy who went 8-8 last year supposed to get $45 million? Because understand that when it comes to Kirk Cousins, here's what his track record has been in Minnesota. 8-8, 10-5, 7-9, and 8-8. Okay? Understand that when it comes to Kirk Cousins, he has been the definition of average. Kirk Cousins has been a guy that throughout his entire existence in Minnesota has been a above average quarterback. So once again, you have to ask the logical question. Is Kirk Cousins realistically worth the $45 million a year? Because I'm going to spell it out for you. N-O. Kirk Cousins is not worth $45 million a year. Now, I will say that he's worth about $35 million a year. I will say that Kirk Cousins is on the same level as someone like a Derek Carr. I will say that Kirk Cousins, I'll give him credit, he is a quarterback that should be on the same pedestal or should be towards a similar level to the above average quarterbacks in the NFL today. In fact, I'm going to say that Kirk Cousins is in a very similar circle as to certain quarterbacks like Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr, and Ryan Tannehill. All right, Ryan Tannehill, Derek Carr, and Jimmy Garoppolo and Kirk Cousins are all in the same pedestal, in my opinion. They are all on the same level when it comes to above average quarterbacks. And you want to know the saying that's in common with all 4 of those? They are being projected to being paid around the same area in terms of salary. So if the Minnesota Vikings decide to move on from Kirk Cousins, if the Minnesota Vikings decide that this is it, all right, this is it is no longer the Kirk Cousins show, we are going to move on from Kirk Cousins. Well, how are they going to keep their quarterback situation? How is the Minnesota Vikings going to put on the field in 2022? Now, I'm actually going to go back to the NFL draft because the 2022 NFL draft has 5 or 6 quarterbacks in this draft class that are solid to average. Understand that this upcoming 2022 NFL draft, I already talked about Malik Willis in the first segment of this show. I say if you're the Detroit Lions, you build around Malik Willis. You have him be your quarterback of the future and not Jared Goff. But if you're the Minnesota Vikings, I say that if you look at your current situation and you look at day 2 of the NFL draft, there is a variety of quarterbacks that are going to be available in day 2. There's going to be a variety of quarterbacks that are going to be available in day 3. Understand that when it comes to the quarterback draft class, there has been a projected 6 quarterbacks that are going to go in the first 2 rounds. So, if you're the Minnesota Vikings, you can find a viable replacement for Kirk Cousins. Now, which one is the bigger question? Which quarterback is going to be the biggest return on your investment if you draft them in the second round. Because I'll give you one. I'm going to give you a quarterback that not only has the confidence, only has the leadership, but this is a quarterback that very solid at Cincinnati. This was a quarterback who took a Cincinnati Bearcats team in the American Athletic Conference to the Final Four. He led a non-Power 5 school into the college football playoff for the first time. So, if you're Desmond Ridder, I think you could fit in a Minnesota-style offense. Understand that Dalvin Cook is going to be the number one option at running back. Dalvin Cook is a top 10 running back in the NFL. They are going to build upon him and going to have a quarterback be a placeholder for the first year or two. Understand, it's going to be a run-first, pass-second team in Minnesota. That is what they're going to do in this situation. Now, you also have the wide receiver situation. You have Adam Thielen. You have Justin Jefferson. All right, you have two of the best wide receivers in the NFL as your number one and as your number two. So, Minnesota Vikings can actually get lucky with drafting a quarterback in round 2 because that quarterback would be able to rely and be able to use as a crutch Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, who once again are two of the best wide receivers in the game today. And when it comes to the offensive line of the Minnesota Vikings, that is something that they actually have built for a long time. When it comes to the Minnesota Vikings organization, they have drafted in the first round. They have used a lot of draft capital on the offensive line. There's also a Minnesota Vikings organization that has been able to draft and also sign all offensive linemen in the past 2 off seasons. So, the Minnesota Vikings already have an offensive line. They have 2 quality wide receivers. And they have a top 10 running back. If you are a young quarterback in the NFL, the Minnesota Vikings might be the best place for you to go. The Minnesota Vikings could actually be a prime destination for a young quarterback because you are not going to have a lot of pressure on you to begin with, because that pressure is going to be on Dalvin Cook. That pressure is going to be on Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. That pressure is going to be taken off of you by the offensive line that they have built the past 2 off seasons. So the first team we discussed was the Detroit Lions. I say Malik Willis from Liberty. He replaces Jared Goff. Minnesota Vikings was team number 2. I say they move on from the $45 million man. They move on from Kirk Cousins. And they pick up Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. Now, the next team in the NFL that is going to be a real interesting case study is an organization that really at this point is having a Hail Mary attempt. The next team has really not had a solid quarterback since Peyton Manning was their quarterback, and that was over 6 years ago. Understand that when it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL, this organization has had journeyman after journeyman after journeyman be part of their organization. All right, from the likes of Joe Flacco, from the likes of Case Keenum, from having Brock Osweiler be there not once but twice. I mean, understand that when it comes to the Denver Broncos organization, they have really not had stability at quarterback. I mean, this is an organization who has used 9 different starting quarterbacks in the last 4 seasons. In 2021, the Denver Broncos, they actually used, believe it or not, a quarterback that they thought was going to be the guy. They thought that Teddy Bridgewater was going to be a solid quarterback, a solid QB number one out there in Denver. Understand that Teddy Bridgewater last year, his stats read like this. Teddy Bridgewater out there in Denver had a record of 7 wins and 7 losses. He had a 66% completion percentage, a 3,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He had what you call a Teddy Bridgewater style season. All right, Teddy Bridgewater is a guy who will get you about 4 touchdowns at every interception. Teddy Bridgewater is a guy that will get you 7 or 8 wins in a season. Okay? If Teddy Bridgewater was brought into Denver to get them to a near 500 record, he succeeded in his goal. All right? Understand that if Teddy Bridgewater was brought in to be a stopgap for 2022, then round of applause, you actually did a good job. But if they actually believe that Teddy Bridgewater was going to get them to a playoff spot, then he missed the mark entirely. So the Denver Broncos are going to need a quarterback in 2022. Teddy Bridgewater is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. And this offseason, there's been a lot of reports that have come out about the Denver Broncos and what they are going to do this offseason. Well, get ready for this here on Sports Angle and PR Connections Radio, because I have a shocker for you. I have a big blow up to the quarterback carousel. Because I believe the Denver Broncos are going to get a superstar at quarterback. I believe for the first time since Peyton Manning, the Denver Broncos are going to have a top 5 quarterback on their roster in Denver. And more importantly, I believe that he's not going to be the only one coming. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be shocked if he brings his star-studded wide receiver alongside him. I'm going to say to you, here on this show, Sports Angle and PR Connections Radio, that the Denver Broncos are going to trade for Aaron Rodgers. I say that the Denver Broncos, the orange and cream, are going to bring in the 4-time NFL MVP. I say the Denver Broncos are going to make a Hail Mary and are going to acquire the back-to-back NFL MVP, the one-time Super Bowl champion, and one of the top 10 quarterbacks in NFL history in Aaron Rodgers. Now, for the people that are shocked by this, let me fill you in on the puzzle. Aaron Rodgers has his offensive coordinator from Green Bay as a head coach in Denver. A lot of former Green Bay assistants are now in Denver. And there's actually a few players from Green Bay who have signed with Denver the past couple of years. As a matter of fact, there is one offensive lineman in Denver that was a longtime stalwart in Green Bay. But you might want to ask yourself the question, why would Aaron Rodgers go to Denver? Why would Aaron Rodgers make the trip down to the Denver Broncos that they are not a contender? Why would he go to a team that cannot win a championship? My rebuttal to you is that if you get Aaron Rodgers, you're going to get free agents to come to Denver. Similar to what happened with Peyton Manning. When Peyton Manning signed with Denver, there were multiple people who went to Denver solely because it was Peyton Manning. When John Elway was the starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos, there were people who went to Denver because they had John Elway. When you have an Aaron Rodgers, there are going to be people who are going to be lining up, going to Denver because Aaron Rodgers will be there. So my angle for the Denver Broncos on the quarterback carousel is that they're going to go all in this offseason. The Denver Broncos are going to do something that hasn't been done in a decade. and that is acquire the best or one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL today, have them be in Mile High, and have them join the Denver Broncos organization. I want everybody in the chat, everyone in the comments section, all people watching around the world, I want your angle to be heard live on the air. Do you agree or disagree so far with what I'm saying? Do you agree or disagree that the Detroit Lions are going to move on from Jared Goff and are going to draft Malik Willis in the NFL draft? Do you believe the Minnesota Vikings are going to de-hitch from the $45 million Kirk Cousins and are going to draft Desmond Ridder in the NFL draft? And when it comes to the Denver Broncos organization, do you believe that the Denver Broncos are going to go all in this offseason and are going to acquire Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers? So we've done a trio of teams so far, but there are 9 teams on this quarterback carousel. All right, this carousel is going to keep on going, and we're going to keep going down the line. Now, the next organization is the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans have a disgruntled, allegation-filled quarterback in Deshaun Watson. Understand that Deshaun Watson has said that he's never going to play for Houston again. Understand that when it comes to the Houston Texans, they had Davis Mills be their starting quarterback last year. They had Tyrod Taylor be their starting quarterback last year. Understand the Houston Texans finished with the 3rd worst record in the NFL. The Houston Texans organization last year struggled mightily without Deshaun Watson. And there are people who are going to make the argument that Deshaun Watson has all the leverage in this situation. There are also going to be people on the other side who are going to say the Houston Texans have all the leverage because of the allegations that Deshaun Watson has. And there are actually some people who could make the realistic argument that the teams that are going to want to trade for Deshaun Watson, they have the leverage because they will be willing to set the price for Deshaun Watson once the allegations are cleared or once the allegations are confirmed. So the Houston Texans are in a very sticky situation, make no mistake about it. But here is what I believe is going to happen. Here is what I believe is going to happen on the quarterback carousel out there in Houston. I want everyone to hear this. I say the Houston Texans will have one more year without Deshaun Watson. He will sit on his couch and collect his payment while second-year quarterback Davis Mills is the starting quarterback for the Houston Texans. Now, I'm going to say that when it comes to the Texans organization, having a second-year quarterback, having a former second-round pick be your starting quarterback, it isn't the biggest shocker in the world. It is not a huge statement to say that when it comes to the Houston Texans, Deshaun Watson not being there actually could be a blessing in disguise because the Houston Texans have a need at running back. The Houston Texans have a need at defensive end. The Houston Texans have a need at multiple positions this offseason. So if you're the Houston Texans, hear me out on this. Here's what I believe. Here's my angle on the sports angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. Here's what I say the Houston Texans need to do. They need to let Deshaun Watson sit on his couch for one more year. They will need Davis Mills to have a second-year resurgence and a second-year growth in Houston. And they're going to trade for a running back. The Houston Texans are going to build off of what Brandon Cooks did last year. They're going to build off an offensive line led by all-pro tackle Laramie Tunzel. And if they can go out and get a defensive end, they can beef up that defense that has been horribly left apart with the departure of J.J. Watt. So I say the Houston Texans will keep their quarterback carousel. They will stay with Davis Mills, but they will acquire a running back. They will acquire another wide receiver. They will build the offensive line. And when it comes to the Houston Texans, they are going to stay put. This is a clear rebuild. Nick Casario, he knows what he's doing. And you're not going to see the Houston Texans be competitive for the next couple of years. So, we've done the Detroit Lions. We've done the Minnesota Vikings. We have done the Houston Texans. And we've done the Denver Broncos. Now, there are 4 teams left. But here's what we're going to do before we have the next team. Here's what we're going to do before that next team comes up. I want to ask all of you that are watching around the world, I want to know from everybody, do you believe that the Miami Dolphins, their owner Stephen Ross, do you think the NFL is going to force him to sell the team? Do you believe that the Miami Dolphins, their owner, Stephen Ross, who has been accused of intentionally taking games for profit, intentionally giving a coach money to lose a game, do you think that he should be forced to sell the team? Because that's the team we're talking about next. Team number 5 is the Miami Dolphins. Understand that when it comes to the Miami Dolphins organization, Tua Tagovailoa, he has been decent. All right, he has been a decent quarterback in the NFL, but he hasn't been a superstar. Understand that Tua has not been the main attraction like he was supposed to be coming out of Alabama. Understand that Tua is a quarterback that is an average to above average quarterback, but he has never been a superstar in his first couple of years in the league. I mean, heck, there has been a lot of reports that have come out even in the last 2 off seasons that the Miami Dolphins are looking to trade Tua Tagovailoa. All right, I want you to understand this guy is only 24 years old, and yet he looks like he's on his way out. Now, his stats for the 2021 NFL season, he had a win-loss record of 7 wins and 5 losses. A completion percentage of 67%, 2,600 passing yards, 16 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Understand that when it comes to Tua, his stats sound average. His stats sound like an average quarterback would. Now, there's also the same guy in Tua who, once again, was a top 5 pick in the 2020 NFL draft. This is a guy who is going to be held to a certain standard in the NFL. So if you're the Miami Dolphins, do you consider trading Tua? If you're the Miami Dolphins, do you encourage your general manager? Do you encourage the ownership? And do you encourage the executives to pull the trigger on getting rid of Tua and replacing him with a different quarterback? Because understand that when it comes to the Miami Dolphins, there's only one or two ways this could go. Either one, they bring in a veteran quarterback as a stopgap, or two, they stay with Tua and they build the entire team around him. And more importantly, if they do get rid of Tua, who is a team that desperately needs a quarterback? Who is a team that desperately needs to add at the quarterback position? Because understand that when it comes to the Miami Dolphins, I actually think I know what they're about to do. In fact, my angle on the Miami Dolphins is that Tua is on his way out. Tua is going to be traded. And they're going to bring in a quarterback with veteran experience. They're going to bring in a quarterback who has been there before. They're going to bring in a quarterback who actually has had plenty of experience competing for his job. That quarterback that I believe the Miami Dolphins are going to acquire, the quarterback that I believe they are going to go out and get, is Jameis Winston. I believe that Jameis Winston, after his tenure in New Orleans, is done. Jameis Winston, New Orleans, they're going to part ways. So if you're the Miami Dolphins, if you know that Tua is not the future, if you understand that Tua Tagovailoa is not the guy, then you need to bring in a quarterback who has had experience. You need to bring in a quarterback who you believe can be in a good system. And more importantly, you need to bring in a quarterback who has been able to improve and progress as a quarterback in the NFL. The Miami Dolphins have weapons. They have a wide receiver in Devontae Parker. They have a tight end in Mike Gesicki. They have a well-built offensive line at certain areas. Understand, this is a Miami Dolphins team that already has a defense that was well-built prior. The Miami Dolphins need a quarterback. The Miami Dolphins need to bring in an established face. And if you're the Miami Dolphins, Jameis Winston, Florida State, Tampa Bay Bucks. Jameis Winston is a guy who has been able to lead a team in the past. Understand that the last 2 years in New Orleans has been a learning and a growing experience for Jameis Winston. So, Jameis Winston going to Miami actually isn't that far of a stretch, because understand that Jameis Winston has been able to mature and grow since the last time he was a starting quarterback. And Jameis Winston last year in a limited role in New Orleans did a fantastic job with the equipment that he was in. So now the second part to that question is, where do I see Tua being traded to? Where do I see Tua being sent? And that answer is that he's going to stay in Florida. Tua is going to stay in Florida. He's going to go from Miami to Tampa. All right? That's what I have happening. I have him being the replacement for Tom Brady. I mean, are you kidding me? Blaine Gabbert? Kyle Trask? Those two quarterbacks are not the future. Those two quarterbacks are not the guy. Tua at least has an opportunity. Tua at least has a chance. So we've gone over 5 teams. We have gone over the Houston Texans. We have gone over Minnesota Vikings. We have gone over Detroit Lions. We have gone over the Minnesota Vikings. And we have gone over the Miami Dolphins. The next team on the quarterback carousel in the NFL is the New York Football Giants. All right, understand the New York Football Giants, they are an interesting team. They're an interesting concept. Because understand the New York Giants have a quarterback in Daniel Jones. They drafted Daniel Jones in the first round in the 2019 NFL Draft. They assumed he was going to be the future. They assumed he was going to be the guy. So far, Daniel Jones has not been the guy. Daniel Jones has not been the elite quarterback that the New York Giants expected him to be when they drafted him top 10 overall. Understand that Daniel Jones last year did not live up to the expectations of what the New York Giants have had for him. All right? So, if you're the New York Giants, what do you do with Daniel Jones? Because Daniel Jones is a quarterback who, by the way, keep in mind, is in his entire career has a win-loss record of 10-25. Understand, this is a guy in Daniel Jones who has a winning percentage less than 33%. Daniel Jones last year had a win-loss record of 4 wins and 7 losses, a 64% completion percentage, one of the worst in the NFL, 2,400 passing yards, only 10 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So, understand that when it comes to Daniel Jones is a quarterback that's on his way out. But if you're New York Giants, what do you replace him with? If you're New York Giants, what do you replace Daniel Jones with out there in the Big Apple? Understand that when it comes to the New York Giants, they have to be willing to bring in somebody. And if you're the New York Giants, you have draft capital. You have 2 first-round picks in the 2021 NFL Draft. Understand that when it comes to the New York Football Giants, they have options. They have the ability to go out and bring in somebody new. They have had the ability to go in and bring in somebody that can be a game changer. But more importantly, bring in a quarterback who has the ability to win. And there is a quarterback who has a high winning percentage in his career that fits the bill. There is a quarterback who already has experience playing in New York that actually would fit the Buffalo Bills system. And as a matter of fact, they've actually brought in his former offensive coordinator as their head coach. They have brought in a former executive that he used to play for as their new general manager. Understand that the New York Football Giants are going to let go of Daniel Jones, and they're going to bring in Mitchell Trubisky. I say the New York Football Giants are going to make a move like most people haven't expected. The New York Football Giants are going to let go of the underwhelming Daniel Jones, and they're going to sign Mitchell Trubisky to be their starting quarterback. Now, before people laugh, I want you to understand something. All right? I want you to comprehend the fact that when it comes to Mitchell Trubisky, he knows how to win. Mitchell Trubisky has a winning percentage. And by the way, I don't know if you know this. Mitchell Trubisky has a winning percentage of 29-21. Understand, this is a guy in Mitchell Trubisky who has had a completion percentage of 64% in his whole career. This is a guy who has gotten better every single year. But more importantly, when it comes to Mitchell Trubisky, the fact that he has had a winning percentage over 60% in the NFL tells me that he knows how to win. Look, despite the fact that, yes, he might be an above average quarterback at best, but he knows how to win. So, I say the New York Giants will sign Mitchell Trubisky this offseason to replace Daniel Jones. And then the last four that we're going to talk about here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. We talked about the Detroit Lions, them letting go of Jared Goff and drafting Malik Willis from Liberty. The Minnesota Vikings letting go of the $45 million man, Kirk Cousins, and bringing in Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati. They also are going to bring in some more talent around them. So, Minnesota Vikings are going to bring in Desmond Ridder. The Miami Dolphins, they're going to let go of Tua, and they're going to bring in Jameis Winston. The Denver Broncos are going to trade for Aaron Rodgers. The Houston Texans are going to keep Deshaun Watson on their couch. And the team that we just talked about recently, the New York Football Giants are going to sign Mitchell Trubisky this offseason. Now, the last three teams I want to mention, as we have been talking about the NFL here on Sports Angle and PR Connections Radio, we are going to talk about an organization in the Washington Commanders. Now, the Washington Commanders, you have Taylor Heineke. All right, Taylor Heineke is a quarterback who has been average. Taylor Heineke has been a quarterback that has been okay, but not great. He has been good, but not amazing. So, if you're the Washington Commanders, do you stick with Taylor Heineke for the third season in a row, or do you go all in on a quarterback? If you're the Washington Commanders, do you stay with Taylor Heineke, or do you go and trade for a big name? If you are the Carolina Panthers organization who had this at one point, do you have the Washington Commanders essentially go all in and try as hard as possible? Or do they end up doing the impossible and trading for a superstar for the first time in almost decades and having a quarterback who is top 10 in the NFL in his prime in Washington? Because that's what I have happening. For team number 7, the Washington Commanders, I have Russell Wilson being traded from one Washington team to another. I have the Washington Commanders going all in this offseason and them getting Russell Wilson. Understand that when it comes to Russell Wilson, he is a quarterback who's good at what he does. Russell Wilson is a quarterback who has been solid in his career. However, understand that Russell Wilson's on his way out in Seattle. Everyone knows that Russell Wilson is on his way out. So if you're the Washington Commanders, you have Dak in your division. You have a young Jalen Hurts in your division. And in my scenario, you're going to have Mitchell Trubisky be the starting quarterback in the Giants organization. Are you really going to trust Taylor Heineke? Are you really going to trust a quarterback who has been average at best? Or are you going to go swinging for the fences? Are you going to do a Hail Mary? Are you just going to toss it up there and hope it works? Because if I'm the Washington Commanders, if this is a brand new team, then you got to start out right. So I'm going to say the Washington Commanders, they will trade for Russell Wilson. They will trade 2 first-round picks and 2 day 2 picks to acquire Russell Wilson. So we have 2 minutes left. We have about 2 minutes left in this segment. So I'm going to very quickly go over the last 2 teams. I'm going to very quickly go over the 2 organizations and what they're going to do at quarterback. So the Chicago Bears are another team. The Chicago Bears, they have an interesting situation. Understand that the Washington Commanders, they have a question mark at quarterback, whereas the Chicago Bears drafted a quarterback last year. Understand that they drafted Justin Fields with a top pick. So the question isn't about what Justin Fields is going to do. The question is, what are they going to do with the veteran quarterbacks on their roster? What are they going to do with Nick Foles? And what are they going to do with Andy Dalton? Are the Chicago Bears going to bring back a veteran quarterback to help assist Justin Fields? Or are they going to drop both Andy Dalton and Nick Foles in order to make sure that they have somebody else? Because my angle is this. My angle is that when it comes to Chicago Bears organization, I say that they are going to keep Andy Dalton and they're going to let go of Nick Foles. That they will keep Andy Dalton as a mentor, as a leader in the locker room, but Andy Dalton is not going to see the field. Andy Dalton is not going to suit up as the starting quarterback. Andy Dalton has officially become the Charlie Whitehurst of the NFL. Andy Dalton has now officially become what John Kitna was in the NFL. In other words, what Andy Dalton is going to be is a veteran quarterback who is going to be used to mentor young quarterbacks. And then the last team we're going to talk about, when it comes to the quarterback carousel of the NFL, is the New Orleans Saints. All right? The New Orleans Saints, they've had a rotating door ever since Drew Brees left. Understand that they had Jameis Winston, they had Trevor Siemian, they had Taysom Hill, they had Ian Book, out of all people. The New Orleans Saints have a huge cluster of people at their organization. Understand that when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, they have a problem. And the problem is that they do not have a full-time quarterback for 2022. So, what do you do if you're the New Orleans Saints? Well, pretty simple. You go and get a quarterback. If you're the New Orleans Saints, you have to go out and get a top-of-the-line quarterback, someone who is going to have the ability to make them better. More importantly, you got to go get a quarterback who will be able to make the team better and not worse. And here's my shocker. Here's why I left the New Orleans Saints towards the end. Because similar to the Seattle Seahawks, where I kind of revealed what I was going to say about Russell Wilson and the fact that they are going to draft a quarterback in the NFL draft to replace Russell Wilson. I say the New Orleans Saints are going to do, and wait for it, the Saints are going to trade with the Las Vegas Raiders. The New Orleans Saints are going to pull off a draft day trade. The New Orleans Saints are going to get their quarterback. And more importantly, the New Orleans Saints are going to get their next franchise quarterback after Drew Brees. I'm going to say to you that I have the New Orleans Saints trading their first-round pick in 2022 and 2 second-round picks in 2022 and 2023 to bring in Derek Carr for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, you might want to understand why I say this. Why would the New Orleans Saints want Derek Carr? Why would the Las Vegas Raiders give up Derek Carr? Well, I'm going to explain that answer here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. On the New Orleans Saints side, they need a franchise quarterback. The New Orleans Saints cannot have a revolving door once again. Understand the New Orleans Saints have restructured the contracts of Michael Thomas. They have had the franchise tag on Marcus Williams. They have Alvin Kamara. Understand that the New Orleans Saints, they have gotten themselves, as of now, out of cap hell and are able to make some moves. Understand that Derek Carr is still on the last year of that $125 million contract he signed back in 2017. Understand that Derek Carr would be a one-year guy that you would sign to an extension long-term. Understand that Derek Carr, the New Orleans Saints, could be a guy that you are going to have be your long-term solution. So you give up a first-round pick to get Derek Carr. Tells me that the New Orleans Saints would be willing and, more importantly, would be able to get a franchise quarterback. And then second, the reason why the Raiders would do it is because their lack of draft capital is essential. The Las Vegas Raiders are going to lose a lot of talent this offseason. The Las Vegas Raiders have so many free agents that want to get paid. And the problem with the Raiders is that they're not going to be able to pay everybody. So out of the nine teams I talked about the quarterback carousel, I will recap every single one of them here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. So the first team I mentioned was the Detroit Lions. And I mentioned with the Detroit Lions that they need to get rid of Jared Goff and draft Malik Willis from Liberty. I mentioned the New York Football Giants and how the Daniel Jones era is over and done with, and they need to sign Mitchell Trubisky to be their starting quarterback in 2022. I mentioned the Minnesota Vikings and how they will not pay $45 million for Kirk Cousins. Instead, they will draft Cincinnati quarterback Desmond Ridder in the second round and trust him to be their guy. I also mentioned the Denver Broncos and how they will trade for Aaron Rodgers and make him their next franchise quarterback, a franchise quarterback they haven't had since Peyton Manning. I mentioned the Houston Texans and how they will keep Deshaun Watson on their couch, stick with Davis Mills, and are going to build the offense around him for the future. I also mentioned the Miami Dolphins. And I talked about the fact that the Miami Dolphins organization is going to move on from Tua and bring in Jameis Winston. I said that the Washington Commanders are going to trade for Russell Wilson. I said that the Chicago Bears are going to keep Andy Dalton and let Nick Foles go to be the veteran leader in the locker room. And then lastly, the New Orleans Saints will trade for Derek Carr and will have a franchise quarterback for the first time since Drew Brees. Now, I want to know from all of you in the chat and all the people down below, do you agree or do you disagree with what I'm saying? Do you agree or disagree that all 9 of these teams who need quarterbacks this offseason have important decisions to make? So with us having about 25 minutes left here in the show, we are going to discuss the NHL. And more importantly, we're going to talk about the NHL Trade Deadline. We are going to discuss the NHL Trade Deadline, and we're going to talk about the players that are going to be on the chopping block. We're going to talk about the players that are the must-see in the NHL. So, when it comes to the NHL, when it comes to the NHL Trade Deadline, there is one player that tops that list. There is one player that I believe is a transcendent talent. And he's actually a player that's in our backyard here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Understand that there is a player here in Las Vegas that has a lot of potential at the trade deadline. Now, understand that the Vegas Golden Knights are buying at a trade deadline. Make no mistake about it. They have those draft picks. Understand that these are the Vegas Golden Knights, and this is a Golden Knights situation, and they have been buying and buying and buying for a long time. So, if I'm talking about the NHL Trade Deadline, I'm talking about a player that's going to come from Vegas and be flipped. Who am I talking about? Who is the player that I believe is on the chopping block? Well, that player is Mattias Janmark. All right? Mattias Janmark, they acquired him from the Chicago Blackhawks this past trade deadline. Mattias Janmark has been a good player in his career at the Vegas Golden Knights. Understand that the Mattias Janmark situation has been a good one for the Vegas Golden Knights. Considering his cap hit, considering what he has done for the Vegas Golden Knights, he has value. And as a matter of fact, there's certain teams in the NHL that could use a Mattias Janmark. Because here's what his stats have been up to this point. Here's what Mattias Janmark has provided for the Vegas Golden Knights. All right? In 47 games this season, he has had 17 points, and 7 of them have been goals. I mean, that's quite impressive. I mean, it's quite impressive that for a guy who's a bottom 6 forward to have 7 goals already on the season, that has value. And a guy who's only has a $2 million cap hit and will be a free agent at the end of the year, that means that he would be a rental for a playoff team. Understand that Vegas Golden Knights could send Mattias Janmark off to a team that needs a rental. In fact, there's a team I think that really needs a Mattias Janmark. There's a team out there that could take a $2 million Mattias Janmark and trade a 5th-round pick to get him. And that is the Anaheim Ducks. Understand the Anaheim Ducks are a young team. The Anaheim Ducks are a playoff contender right now. And understand the Anaheim Ducks have a lot of promise on the way. So, when it comes to the Mattias Janmark situation, I truly believe that the Anaheim Ducks could flip a 5th-round pick, bring in a Mattias Janmark, and get some cap off the Vegas Golden Knights. Hey, Guy Dawson, my good friend. It's good to be here. PR Connections Radio. I'm happy to be here. And that's correct. Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio every single Friday night. And talking about the NHL Trade Deadline, focusing on the Vegas Golden Knights right now. And I'm talking about people who could be dealt from the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm starting from the practical ones to the unlikely. So the practical one is Mattias Janmark. Because of his $2 million cap hit and the fact that he's a bottom six forward who's a rental, there are going to be teams who are going to have a need for that position. Evgeny Dadonov is also another practical and very likely possibility of getting flipped for the Vegas Golden Knights. Understand that Evgeny Dadonov is a veteran in the NHL. He was a really good winger for the Florida Panthers all those years ago. Understand that Evgeny Dadonov, his cap hit right now of $5 million is a very interesting situation in the NHL. So, what does his stats look like this year for the Vegas Golden Knights? He has 10 goals, 21 points in 53 games. Understand that when it comes to Evgeny Dadonov has experience. Evgeny Dadonov has one aspect of his game that is vital and important to a playoff push. And that is the fact that he has been in the playoffs. As a matter of fact, he has been in the playoffs a lot. In fact, he has actually been in a playoff situation 6 different times in his career. He's been there. He's done that. So who would be a team that needs a playoff experienced guy? Who's an organization that could actually provide a couple of draft picks to bring in a veteran? Well, just look down to New York Rangers. The New York Rangers organization, led by Gerard Gallant, the former Vegas Golden Knights head coach, he is a great coach, very solid mind, but more importantly, when it comes to Evgeny Dadonov, him being a goal scorer and him being a guy who can get the puck in the back of the net, that would provide value for New York Rangers. The New York Rangers could get a guy like Dadonov for very cheap. Once again, you're not going to have to sacrifice much to get Evgeny Dadonov. But more importantly, the New York Rangers have a current cap space of $21 million. So because they have a $21 million in cap space, they could easily take $5 million of Evgeny Dadonov and put that to their cap. Unlike the Vegas Golden Knights, who only have a cap space of $4.3 million to contend with. So, I'm going to say Evgeny Dadonov is practical. I'm going to say that Mattias Janmark is practical. Those are the two that the Vegas Golden Knights could easily get rid of, and they could bring back 2 fifth-round picks. They could get back a 4th-round pick. Maybe they get a low-end prospect for one of those guys. Understand that when it comes to the prospect pool of the Vegas Golden Knights, adding upon that would be a very smart move in Las Vegas. So now we're talking about the NHL Trade Deadline here on Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. So we've talked about the 2 practical ones. Now let's get into the fun ones. Let's get into the trio that I don't see happening, but oh boy, would it be fun if it did. The first one would be Vegas Golden Knights fan favorite, a Vegas Golden Knight original, and one of my favorite players on the Vegas Golden Knights in Riley Smith. Riley Smith has been there since day one. Riley Smith has had a long decade in the NHL. And more importantly, Riley Smith has a $5 million cap hit. And because he has a $5 million cap hit, and the fact that he's on the last year of his $25 million deal he signed back in 2017, that makes Riley Smith a valuable asset. Understand that $5 million that Riley Smith has, similar to Evgeny Dadonov, would be a valuable and a more lucrative situation for the Vegas Golden Knights. So, when it comes to Riley Smith, it's not going to happen. But it would be interesting if it did, because there's a team right now that needs wingers. There's a team right now in the Detroit Red Wings who's battling for the 8th and final spot in the NHL Eastern Conference. I understand the Detroit Red Wings are going to make a Hail Mary attempt to try to get above Detroit, Boston, Toronto. I mean, those are right there when it comes to the NHL. Detroit is right here. Columbus is right here. They're going to make some moves at the Nhl Trade Deadline. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it would be a fun scenario to see the Detroit Red Wings get a 3rd and a 4th and package that to Vegas to get Riley Smith. Also, the fact that the Detroit Red Wings have a lot of former Florida Panthers on that team, and the fact that Riley Smith is a former Florida Panther, it has a very fascinating project to it. So, I would say the Ottawa Senators, they're next on this, and I'm only bringing them up for one reason. The Ottawa Senators are well known and are well established as a team that loves to bring in goaltenders who have history. The Ottawa Senators love to bring in former goaltenders who have had success in the past. So, as someone said in the comments down below, I think that it would be kind of fun if the Ottawa Senators traded for Robin Lehner and they traded off 2 draft picks to get him. Now, once again, these are not practical. These are just being, fun off the cuff. But Robin Lehner being traded to Ottawa, where goaltenders go to die, a Ottawa team that Robin Lehner has already been with in the past, would be a interesting touch, considering the fact that the Vegas Golden Knights, in their eyes, already have a great goaltender in Logan Thompson. In fact, I've had a lot of people tell me that Logan Thompson is the future in net for the Vegas Golden Knights. I have had multiple people tell me, and they're trying to convince to me, that Logan Thompson, even though he was an undrafted goalie and was in the minors for all of it last year, is the guy in Las Vegas. So if Logan Thompson is the guy in your perceived mind, then trade Robin Lehner, send him to, goalie purgatory, and have Logan Thompson be the main guy. Now, obviously, I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, because Robin Lehner, yes, he has underperformed this year. But I will take Robin Lehner over Logan Thompson. All right, Robin Lehner's been in the league for many years, whereas Logan Thompson has had maybe 8 games in the entire NHL. So, the last person I'm going to say is Nolan Patrick. I understand Nolan Patrick, the former 2nd overall pick in the 2017 NHL draft. This is a guy who has done a lot. This is a guy who has been making a lot of progress when it comes to the NHL, but he has had injury problems. He has had injury concerns in his career. So, understand that when it comes to Nolan Patrick, yes, they could trade him. It is a possibility that could end up happening. But the question you have to be asking yourself is that would the Vegas Golden Knights trade away a former 2nd overall pick that they acquired just 7 months ago? Would the Vegas Golden Knights be eager enough to get rid of a person that they just acquired by sending away their former top pick in Cody Glass to get? Because, look, I understand that there's going to be Vegas Golden Knights fans who think that this needs to be done. I also understand that there's going to be hockey fans who don't see Nolan Patrick as a great player. There's people who said he's a bust. There's all these interesting situations that are happening with Nolan Patrick. Now, personally, I still see the talent in Nolan Patrick, but I don't believe his body will hold up. I do not believe that he will be able to play an entire season. As a matter of fact, Nolan Patrick has never been able to play an entire season in the NHL. So, with the Vegas Golden Knights, you have to ask yourself the logical question, and that logical question is, if you don't think he can play an entire 82-game season, if he is not a true 200-foot player, do you essentially trade him to Nashville? Do you trade him to one of these teams to get him off your books and just let him go? Because my angle with Nolan Patrick is that he's talented, but he has been worn out. He's good, but he doesn't have much left. So my angle with the Vegas Golden Knights is that if they did trade away the former second overall pick they acquired 7 months ago, it will essentially be a dump just to get them off his books. Essentially, they don't really want anything in return for Nolan Patrick. They would just pretty much be trading him away just to get him off their books. Now, when we're talking about the Vegas Golden Knights, that's fine. But there's more than just one team in the NHL. As a matter of fact, there is 32 teams in the NHL. So we're going to kind of do a fun freestyle where I'm going to go and talk about certain teams in the NHL, and I want to focus on if they can win at the NHL Trade Deadline. More importantly, I want to focus if I believe that the NHL Trade Deadline, are these teams going to be buying? Are they going to be giving up assets? Or is this team going to be selling and acquiring assets at the trade deadline? Now, the first team I want to mention is the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Vancouver Canucks, they have an interesting development. Because anyone who's been watching the NHL, anybody who's been paying attention to the NHL this season, you will know that the Vancouver Canucks started off terrible. The Vancouver Canucks had an awful start to the season. They got rid of their general manager. They got rid of the head coach. They had to bring in an entire new staff. But it looks like it's starting to do some good. They're only 4 points out from a playoff spot. Right now, the Vancouver Canucks organization has a slight chance of getting in. However, there's also the same Vancouver Canucks team that, according to CapFriendly.com, which I don't know what I would do without you, if the Vancouver Canucks, they only have $2.4 million in cap space. This is a franchise that it has a very limited amount of move power to acquire assets. So, if you're the Vancouver Canucks, are you buying or are you selling at the trade deadline? Considering, once again, you only have $2.4 million in cap space, you're not going to be able to acquire a superstar at the trade deadline. You are not going to be able to acquire a great player, in a move to make your team better. So, from what I understand about the Vancouver Canucks, they're going to be selling at the deadline. Do not be surprised if they let go of 3 or 4 players at this point. I will not be shocked if the Vancouver Canucks let go of players like, for example, guys like Tanner Pearson, 29 years old, but has a big cap hit for the Vancouver Canucks. I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Travis Hamonic, 31 years old, defenseman, he's has $6 million on the books. I could see him being shipped out. I could even see a possibility of them letting go of someone like Michael Furlan, a player they signed to a $7 million cap hit out there in Vancouver. 29 years old. He's on the back end of his prime. I wouldn't be surprised if they let him go. And just to add one more out there, their goaltender in Jaroslav Halak, 36 years old. He's an aging veteran. If the Vancouver Canucks know that they're not going to win a championship, I wouldn't be surprised if a playoff team called Vancouver and tried to get Jaroslav Halak to be in their organization. So we're talking about Jacksonville. We talked about all these teams in the NFL in the past. Well, What if I told you that there's a team in the NHL that's very similar to Jacksonville Jaguars? What if I told you that there is the NHL equivalent to Jacksonville Jaguars, and to the fact that they simply have no future in sight? What if I told you that the Seattle Kraken are going to be sellers at the Nhl Trade Deadline? I understand the Seattle Kraken have talent from that expansion draft, but the problem that they're going to have is that they essentially have too many aging veterans that are going to be on the chopping block. Understand that this is an organization that you have your captain and Mark Giordano, who, by the way, is on an expiring contract. You also have someone like, for example, Colin Blackwell, Riley Sheehan, Marcus Johansson, Callie Yarncook. Jared McCann, who's a restricted free agent. Understand that the Seattle Kraken have so many pending free agents and so many restricted free agents that I will not be shocked if the Seattle Kraken sell the entire system and put them on the open market. So the Vancouver Canucks, I see them selling. The Seattle Kraken, I see them selling. So who's a team I see buying in? Who is an organization that I could actually see making a bad move and actually trying to acquire talent and bring them into the trade deadline? Well, that organization right there is the San Jose Sharks. I understand the San Jose Sharks have already been making some very desperate moves in the last couple of days. I understand this is a San Jose Sharks team that has acquired Ryan Dzingel, has acquired Alex DeLocke. I understand this is a San Jose Sharks team that, even though they are a couple points out from the 8th spot, they think they can get a playoff spot. This is a San Jose Sharks team that is aiming to rebound and get in to the NHL. Understand this is a situation where the San Jose Sharks are looking to do what the St. Louis Blues did a couple of years ago, which is buy and buy and buy at the Nhl Trade Deadline and make a Stanley Cup run in the process. Now, do I believe they're good enough to do it? No. Do I believe the San Jose Sharks are going to be a playoff team? No. But I think in Doug Wilson's mind, they are good enough to be a playoff team. I think in Doug Wilson's mind, he convinced himself that they're good enough to be a playoff team. So now we're talking about the Nhl Trade Deadline on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. There is a team I also want to focus on very quickly here on this show, and that is an organization that has promise, an organization that has talent. However, are they committed to going all in? Are they committed to getting rid of their aging veterans and bringing in young talent in a trade? And that is the Los Angeles Kings. Now, for anyone who hasn't been watching hockey, the Los Angeles Kings organization is currently, right now, they have the 4th best record in the Western Conference. The Los Angeles Kings are 2nd in the West and are 4th in the conference. So, if you're the Los Angeles Kings, you're only 4 points away from the division title. Is it possible that you go all in? Because understand the Los Angeles Kings organization, they have the young pieces. They have Victor Arvidsson. Understand this is an organization that has so much of that rebuild already established that it's actually scary to see what the Los Angeles Kings are capable of. So, I'm going to say that the Los Angeles Kings are going to buy. And more importantly, I think the Los Angeles Kings are actually going to make an interesting choice, and that is sell off one of their franchise superstars and bring in another face to replace him. Because understand that the Los Angeles Kings have had a really talented guy in their helm for a long time. His name was Adrian Kempe. And Adrian Kempe has been a good stalwart for the LA Kings, but with all the young talent around him, he makes him expendable. So, I say the Kings are going to buy, I say the Sharks are going to buy, and I say the Vegas Golden Knights are going to buy. Where I say the Seattle Kraken, I say the Vancouver Canucks, and I also say another team I think is going to sell, and that is the Arizona Coyotes. So, Coyotes are going to sell, the Canucks are going to sell, the Kraken are going to sell. Also, the Golden Knights are going to buy. You also have all these different teams that are going to buy at the NHL Trade Deadline. So, and we're talking about the NHL Trade Deadline here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I want to ask all of you. I want to ask everyone who's watching around the world and all the people who are going to be watching this and listening to this on all different platforms we're going to be uploading this show to. When it comes to the NHL Trade Deadline, do you believe that the Vegas Golden Knights are going to buy or are going to sell at the deadline at the end of March? Do you believe the Vegas Golden Knights are going to do its best for business and are going to sell off assets like Evgeny Dadonov, sell off assets like Matthias Janmark, maybe sell off a Robin Lehner? Or are they going to buy assets? Are they going to strengthen the bottom six? Are they going to strengthen a terrible defensive line? And are they going to buy and potentially get another goaltender to strengthen their crease? I want to know from all of you, I want to know all the people who are watching right now when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights. Because I really think that they're going to be buying at the deadline. I really believe the Vegas Golden Knights need to desperately acquire defensive help. Understand, this is a Vegas Golden Knights team that, in terms of talent, has the ability to go to a Stanley Cup. Understand, this is a Vegas Golden Knights team that has enough talent to get the job done. But the problem is that when it comes to Vegas Golden Knights, they do not have enough depth on defense. Understand, this is a Vegas Golden Knights team that does not have enough on defense. They've had injuries. They've had problems. There's all these different things that are going on with the Vegas Golden Knights. So understand that when it comes to Vegas, when it comes to defense, they need to fix that. They need to get that done, and they need to make sure that